we're going to be speaking with Peter Hebert about Reproduction Bibles. Peter, you've had many people ask you about what you do. Tell us a bit about Reproduction Bibles.
I'm glad you asked. Reproduction Bibles is a small company that we set up to reproduce historically significant Bibles in English. What makes us different from, I'm going to use the word competitors, but they're not competitors. What makes us different from them is that we're not working with Latin facsimiles. For lack of a better comparison, our competitors are in Europe and they work with Latin facsimiles. They're beautiful. I encourage any researcher or collector to invest in them and hold on to them. But that's not our market. Our market is English language Bibles. And they're developed from the ground up. They're not facsimiles.
Okay.
So they're laser sharp, beautiful to look at. There is no fuzziness in our work because they're not facsimiles.
Okay. Thank you. What prompted you to start Reproduction Bibles?
You know, that's probably the most common question that's asked. I think in 1992, I was working downtown a couple blocks from the Library of Congress. And when I realized how close I was to the Library of Congress, I took advantage of flex time.
Okay.
And I had 2-hour lunch breaks. So I would take a cab 2-3 blocks, so I would squeeze that extra 5, 10, 15 minutes. And I was in the rare book room. And one day the rare book librarian brought out a copy of an old Psalter. I didn't know what I was looking at. This was back in the day when everyone had to wear white gloves made out of cotton. The book was opened up. The manuscript was opened up. A little red velvet sandbag was put down to hold it in place. What I was examining was a Psalter from the early 1400s, and I was overcome by the colors, by the beauty of the manuscript hand, because everything was done by hand. The gold leafing, the brilliance of the blue, that's the result of lapis lazuli, which comes from Afghanistan. And back then, lapis lazuli was far more expensive than gold. So that's how I spent my lunch breaks for quite a while, studying those kind of manuscripts in the rare book room. And then one day there was an exhibit at the Library of Congress, and I went with a friend, and I believe it was the Lindisfarne Gospels from the British Library that were on loan and on display. It might have been the Book of Kells, I don't remember, but it was one of the Celtic Gospels. And it was on display, and I was with a friend, and I said, one of these days I'm going to reproduce those. I was so taken by how beautiful the script was, the art, the color, the vividness, the intensity, and the statement that was being made by those who produce these ancient works. So that's how I got started.
Very interesting. May I ask something about it?
Please.
You were saying that the way you examined the artifacts in the Bibles back then was with white gloves. Is that how you still do it nowadays?
Believe it or not, no. There are 2 ways to examine a manuscript Bible that's held by a museum or a library. The most common way, which is the way I prefer, is to go online to the British Library and to look at their holdings in a digitized format, or flip the book, turn the book.
Okay.
And it's great because you can quickly survey the entire 800s based on what the British Library holds. My favorite place, to be honest, is the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris. Their portal is Gallica. I love that website because I have seen the best of the best of the best, and they have a huge library. So in the comfort of an easy chair or my home office desk, I can go in and explore and So when people ask me, what do you do in your spare time? I said, I don't have spare time, I work. Well, what do you do? I said, oftentimes I'm communicating with a rare book librarian in either Paris or London. That's what I do, believe it or not. It's odd, it's rare, most people don't do those kind of things. But I had the good fortune of going to Paris with my wife and with a gentleman who was working as a judge in Belgium, and his wife and the four of us, we went on a holiday, so to speak, to Paris. My wife and her friend went to see the Eiffel Tower, and Michelle and I went into the rare book room of the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. And we requested a copy of the Chartrain Bible. This Bible was produced in the late 1100s, 2 massive volumes. We're talking a pulpit-sized Bible.
Wow.
We were told to come back after lunch, so Michelle and I went out. We had lunch at a French bistro, came back after lunch hours, and in a dolly, a gentleman carted out 2 volumes, and we photographed Volume 1 and Volume 2 to our heart's content. We were not asked to wear gloves. The upper left and upper right corners of these Bibles were greasy, if you will. They had fingerprint stains from hundreds of years of use. So whoever was reading from the text, either in an abbey or more likely in the Cathedral of Chartres, was going like this, and then grabbing the page and turning it, because the stains in the upper corners are quite obvious what was going on. But the intensity of that Bible is over the top. The facsimiles that you see that are being produced and the high-resolution PDFs that are online don't come close to the real thing. We had the privilege of handling the real thing. And these 2 volumes were over 800 years old.
Okay.
When we returned to the States, you're not going to believe what happened.
What happened?
The Chartrain Bible was no longer available for public viewing. They
Really?
digitized it and put it online.
Okay.
I was the last one to look at them. I'm almost sure of it.
That's quite the honor.
Believe it or not.
Wow.
So it's an amazing thing. It's breathtaking to look at. It's as if we're standing over the shoulder of an artist, a scribe, a designer, as well as the person reading the text from the pulpit. When you're handling something like that. I'm shivering. Actually, I am. Thinking about it.
No, thank you for sharing that experience.
Yeah.
Well, the next question would be, how did you get started with the reproduction of Bibles?
Well, believe it or not, I produced a copy of, I believe it was the Apocalypse, from the Cologne Bible woodcuts. The Cologne Bible was produced in Cologne, Germany. And the woodcuts are stunning. And I happen to have had a copy of the book. And I produced, actually, it wasn't the Apocalypse, it was the book of Genesis. And I produced a copy of it. I did it from the ground up. I tried to pull together the book opening and chapter opening letters, and I placed the woodcuts in place, had it printed, had it bound, and my brother looked at it and said, "Peter, you should be doing the entire Bible." And my wife's niece said, "I would love to have something like this to read to my son," because it's so engaging to look at the woodcuts. And I'll be honest, that's what I love too. I love those woodcuts. The Cologne Bible is what you call incunabla. It's out of the crib.
Okay.
First out of the gate, those are the best Bibles that were ever produced. The stuff that's first out of the gate. the second, third generation that tries to reproduce and continue in a tradition, the quality declines.
Okay.
So in almost all of the Bibles out there, depending on what period, genre, geographical region you're looking at, it's almost the same way.
Oh,
First out of the gate is the best stuff,
Okay.
because that's where the genius is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I took the inspiration, especially from my brother, when he said, you should be producing a Bible and making it available for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
because this is unique. It's not a Wall Street or Madison Avenue, New York City type Bible that's, the font is so small, the paper is thinner than toilet paper. You can see through the paper, and when you hold it up to the light, and it's nothing like that type of Bible. This is different. It's a real thing. It has a real quality to it that the mass-produced Bibles don't have. So that's why.
And how many Bibles have you reproduced since then with that quality?
That's a good question. Thus far, we have produced the Gutenberg Bible in English, which I have in my possession now. The one copy of the Gothic Apocalypse, based on the Wells Apocalypse, held by the British Library, sold immediately.
Okay.
And it was a very expensive item. It's about a $2,000 book. It's only about 100 pages. There was a ton of gold in it, and vivid, intense colors. It went to a pathologist in Ohio, I believe. And he's a man who's he's not a collector, he's actually a believer. So I've also produced the 4 gospel books in a large format, based on the period of Charlemagne. And I've already had it illuminated. It was quite costly. It's sitting, waiting to be bound, because the binding that we're going to do is going to be carved by hand, and it's going to be in wood.
Wow.
We're going to truly try to replicate what was done in the past. So that's what we do. We look at the past and we say, what's the big deal about this genre? And in this case, it's a post-Celtic period of Charlemagne. What's the big deal? The big deal is that it's different. You know, this is the period when the Viking ships are coming up. I believe it's the Seine River to Paris, and they're threatening to burn everything down. That's when these things were being read. And the reason they're so big and beautiful is the priest would walk down the aisle holding it, the Bible in his hand like this. And that's the big deal about it, about that specific one. So that's done. It's waiting to be for a wood carver to put together a book binding for us. The other stuff we do is we rebind the 1611 King James in facsimile. That's not something we produce, but it's actually our bread and butter because it sells very well. And it's our least expensive item. It's between $500 to $600. And we take the binding that the producer, the seller has, and we throw it away. Take it off and throw it away where it belongs, in the trash. And we turn it over to a professional binder.
Okay.
And the binder puts on a calf skin with raised bands and gold tooling, and it's exquisite. It's museum quality. And that's what we're about, producing museum quality heirlooms, the kind of thing that would be listed in a will.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're about.
Very nice. And in this process, what translation are you using?
That's a good question. The core translation thus far has been the Douay-Rheims-Schallner revision.
Okay.
I have the Gutenberg Bible in English with me now, and it's in 2 volumes. And this is the first copy that we have put together. It's in 2 volumes. This one is not for sale.
Okay.
This is mine. This is ours, if you will. But what we're going to be offering to the public, and more than likely our public who's going to have an interest in this, is the researcher, the collector, and the believer.
Okay.
The collector is somebody who wants an amazing library. And you start with an amazing Bible. And that's going to require, of course, the period binding. And what you're looking at here is calfskin in a natural finish. It's calfskin in a natural finish. There is no dye.
Okay.
And this is the kind of Bible, believe it or not, you would have to use white gloves because the skin has perspiration and oils on it. So over time, the binding would be different.
Yeah.
It'll become different. So, but what we're going to be offering this in the Dewey Reams in plain English, modern English.
Okay.
All right, which means there are no these and thous, and there are modern words.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, but it'll be true to translation.
Okay. Very nice.
So, just to give you an idea of what this looks like. Opened up. I think I'm opened up to 1 Kings, and we are at chapter, is that 30? You can see here that we're dealing with a Gothic text. We're dealing with hand-done letters. My wife made these letters. Every red and blue that you see on the page was done by hand, and then it was digitized, scanned, and then brought into Photoshop, bumped up to 600 DPI, and then carefully placed.
Interesting. And where did you get the font from?
The font, believe it or not, comes from Europe. It comes from an academic. His name is not on the tip of my tongue. But this was produced by an academic who studied the originals held by the museums and the libraries. And for posterity, he made them available so that people like me on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean can work with a font to be faithful to the original. And that's what this is. It's faithful to the original, except for the language. It's in English.
Right. And what, in general, I mean, this is the Gutenberg Bible. What is the big deal about the Gutenberg Bible?
Well, that's a good question, because the Gutenberg Bible is a household name.
Oh, okay.
Number one. Number two, it was mentioned, believe it or not, in Star Trek.
Oh.
But really, the big deal about the Gutenberg Bible is that this is the beginning of the brilliance of German engineering.
Okay.
So Johannes Gutenberg and two other guys, their names are not on the tip of my tongue right now, worked in the relentless pursuit of perfection.
Okay.
That's a great way to put it. They went bankrupt.
Okay.
Johannes Gutenberg ended bankrupt. His partners foreclosed on him, took the press, and he went into retirement in a abbey.
Okay.
But his genius, his unwillingness to give up, was the ability to produce something like this that would put every manuscript scribe on notice. And that's what happened here. The big deal about the Gutenberg Bible is this. We're dealing with the mathematics of beauty. It's considered the most beautiful Bible in the world. And the secret behind it, believe it or not, is Pythagoras.
Okay.
All right? Roman Catholics are not anti-intellectuals. This is a Roman Catholic Bible. And the mathematics behind it are the 2-to-3 ratio. That's the golden ratio.
Okay.
That's Pythagoras. The text block is 2-to-3. That's the brilliance of the Greek mind. And the brilliance of German engineering, and the unwillingness to give up no matter what. So because of that, we have something brilliant. The other big deal is that the Gutenberg Bible, for the first time in Western history, permitted the Bible to become a fixed text, examinable by anyone.
What does that
entail? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Prior to the Gutenberg Bible, there was no fixed text to the Bible.
Okay.
All right, for example, or a fixed translation, for that matter.
Okay.
So here we have a fixed translation as well as a fixed text.
Okay.
Okay, so what does that mean? A fixed text means that every prologue and argument and preface and book is in exactly the same order, one copy after the other. Okay? After the Crusaders, came back from the Middle East, we started to see new Bibles that were different. They had 3rd and 4th Maccabees. They had odes. They had Psalm 151. They had the letter to the Laodiceans. Okay, they were all working with the Latin Vulgate. But these crusaders, when they went east and they came back home, they came back with more than just spices and silks and the knowledge to vent air downward, which was a technology developed by the Arabs. They came back with more books to the Bible, books that were being used by the Assyrian church and by the Egyptian church. Okay. The second issue is, this is the Latin Vulgate that Jerome translated many, many years ago. Up into even beyond this period, 1454 to 1460, which is what this represents, this Gutenberg Bible in English represents, the Codex Gigas, or the Devil's Bible, up in, I think it's now in Sweden, was working off of the text of the Latin, what is it? The Old Latin Bible. And the Old Latin Bible is based on classical Latin. It's not based on the Latin that everybody spoke. And so in Western Europe, you did not have one standard text, nor did you have one standard translation. Many people don't realize that. It wasn't until the time of Charlemagne that we finally started to get one right to how to celebrate the Mass. It was during the time of Charlemagne. So we had one translation, we had one text, and we had one rite that was observed, and that's because of Charlemagne. But the big deal about the Gutenberg Bible is that we have a fixed text, a fixed translation, and it was able to be examined by anybody who could access it, and they did. Within 100 years or so, we had the Protestant Reformation.
Okay.
Whoa. So, unintended consequence, but it happened, and it's in large part due to this.
Okay.
That's a long answer for a simple question. So we have several things: the beauty of the page layout, page design, the art that you see here. It's engaging, without question. Then, of course, you've got the issue of translation, and then the issue of, you want to get a close-up of the opening? I'm so proud of my wife. She did that by hand.
It's very beautiful. Yep. And with what ink was that done?
I'm not sure of the reds and the blues or the inks that she used, but what we did is we went to the Library of Congress and we worked off of the edition that they had, that's in their possession. We worked with those letters. And then my wife reproduced them by hand.
Very impressive.
Yeah, it is. It's quite impressive. It's different.
It is.
Yeah, it has an impact. It's engaging. It's riveting. What I like about this is that I have a Protestant orientation, and I love Protestant Bibles, but what I don't like about them is that they're study Bibles. And if you want to know the truth, I'm kind of done with intense study.
Yeah.
I would rather just read for pleasure and let the text speak to me, and then let my memory and my knowledge of the Bible go back and forth, comparing verse with verse with verse, instead of 40,000 study notes.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I understand, yeah.
But there's a Bible for everybody, and this Bible is not meant to be the Bible with a 40,000 study notes. So,
yeah, fair enough. I understand.
Yeah. It's meant to be pleasing on the eyes.
Of course.
This indeed is.
Very much so. Yeah.
The beauty of it also is that we have all of Jerome's prologues and prefaces. And we also have some prologues and prefaces from people who were later, after the fact, deemed not to be truly Catholic in their theology.
Okay.
And like it or not, that is the fact. This is the opening page to Genesis. The terminology for this page in Latin is this is the incipit page.
The incipit page.
Yeah, the first word is Latin.
What does it mean?
In the beginning.
Okay.
So part of the trick for me to get around my way online to all the libraries and museums is I had to learn Latin.
Yeah.
Because I was searching in Latin. And,
Of course,
and in
yeah.
some cases in other languages. And over a period of time, I was able to figure out where the best libraries were and who had the best holdings and what terms and conditions they were made available under. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And on that note, what future projects do you have?
Well, I think this coming year, I am going to be rolling up my sleeves and focused on this translation and then putting it into plain English.
Okay.
Like I alluded to earlier, there won't be any these or thous or thines. Archaic words, for example, in the Our Father, give us this day our daily bread. In this translation, we have the word supersubstantial.
Okay.
Believe it or not. And that's exactly the word that's in Latin. And our daily, give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses. So what does supersubstantial mean? Why is it there? If I were translating it today, it would be give us this day our fortified bread. You know, all nutritious, fortified, filling bread.
Yeah.
If you're going to work on a literal, what does it actually mean level?
Yeah.
But for those who know the Bible, it means manna, the manna that comes down from heaven, which is Jesus Christ himself. He's the manna from heaven. That's what he said. But anyway, supersubstantial, it's an awkward word, like it or not. And in modern Catholic Bibles, they don't use that word anymore. They use daily bread. So, yeah, things like that. That doesn't need to be there. It doesn't help. It actually, you don't, when you read a Bible, you should not have to go to footnotes or a dictionary. The Bible should read itself, and it should be a pleasure to read, and then in the process, the Bible reads you. It convicts us, and it tells us, we should not having outbursts of anger, or we should not be doing things that give us a bad conscience, so that we have a good conscience, a clear conscience, because when we have a good, clean conscience, we pray and God answers immediately sometimes. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, but that's what happens when you read the Bible. The Bible reads you. So it's a perennial text. It's got all the issues of the day and all the issues that span every generation and every time and people and circumstance. And it's a controversial book because it also tells us things sometimes that we don't want to hear.
Okay.
You know, it does, like it or not. It's not politically correct. It's not a text that is meant to, how do I say this, conform to a given time period.
Okay.
It's meant to elevate us above a time period, to be perennial, which means from generation to generation, God is the same, his commandments are the same, his love is the same, his grace is the same, the invitation to come and believe and obey is the same. It does not change. God is universal, and his love is universal, and the call to salvation, if you will, is universal as well. So that's what makes the Bible different from any other text.
Well, thank you very much for answering the questions.
You are welcome. I'm glad you asked.
Thank you very much.